Okay, you know what time it is. It's Waterproof Records time. Yeah, that's right. These just keep coming, and I keep having guests on the show, and you guessed it, it's guest time once again. And I'm going to probably say this every time because I only have people on Waterproof Records that I absolutely love and admire, and they inspire me. And this is someone that I feel so fortunate that I got a chance to connect with. And he's on the show today, and I'm thrilled about it. So right now we're going to do the song to kick things off, get the episode going, and then I'll bring him on the show. But we got to do all the logistics beforehand. But today we are going to be talking about Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures with Dusty Gannon. Let's go.
Things are going to change. I can feel it.
If there's going to be that kind of party, I'm going to...
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records with Jacob Gibbons.
All right, before I welcome on my guest, I got to talk about our sponsor, DistroKid. And I can't rave enough about this company and what they do and how they make it easy for all of us to get our music out there in the world. They're one of those services. I remember when I was putting out my first album in 2007, this kind of stuff was rare and you had limited options, but DistroKid makes it so easy for you to, you're writing songs, whatever genre it is, you can publish it and get it on every service you could think of. And it's just a great way to market yourself and take control of your music. And I highly recommend their service. And make sure to check out my profile because there is a link. I have a VIP link. It's just basically distrokid.com/VIP/waterproof. And if you click on that, you get 30% off for your first year with DistroKid. And 30% off is pretty significant, and it's already reasonably priced. But once you're in there, you can add so many things like the credits, the songs, the lyrics. They have all sorts of widgets and things that you can plug in, get yourself some videos moving on Spotify, whatever you want to do. But again, I can't rave about them enough, so check out DistroKid. Now that that's out of the way, now I get to move on to the guest. And like I said right up top, I was just so excited that I got a chance to connect, talked with this person. He's been inspiring me since I saw his first videos. And you know what? He looks magnificent all the time. I have to say that. I love his taste in music. I love the music his band makes. And when I asked him to come on the show and he said yes, I was so happy. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Dusty Gannon, aka Vision Video. You know him, you love him. Here he is. Let's go.
Hi there. How's it going? Thanks for having me on here.
Yes, absolutely. Welcome, Dusty.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I got to say, right off the bat, it's awesome, and it's so kind of you to say all these wonderful things, but in kind as well. Likewise, one of my favorite things about meeting people on TikTok is just experiencing people who have real unadulterated joy for music and creative expression and stuff like that. And I will never forget the first time I saw one of your videos was one of the ones where I can't remember what the song was, but it was just something with a really wicked guitar just blasting, and then you're getting hit with a leaf blower or something. And you're
mayonnaise, Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah,
mayonnaise.
I guess it was mayonnaise. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite Pumpkin songs. So I was just holy shit, this is hilarious, and
yes.
it's so pure and true. Thank you for making such cool stuff for people to appreciate. Music in its artistic form.
I appreciate that, man. And so many people who watch this show, the majority of you listen, I know. If you can, I want you to come watch. If you've never seen Vision Video and their stuff, Dusty, his makeup is impeccable. Right now, he's got some bat wings on his head. He's got, a jack-o'-lantern shirt on. He's got the room is decked out. He's got a Fright Night poster, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time, in the background.
Yes.
And I'm thrilled because right now it feels like it's Halloween in February with you on the show, which is great.
It's never too early to start, and it helps that I'm just a walking human stereotype anyway. So but I grew up I love spooky stuff. I became really indoctrinated by a very probably too early allowance to like watching horror films. Like my dad was like, I was probably about 8 when I watched like Pet Sematary, and I was just like, oh my God, I was like blown away. And so it just started a litany, like a lifelong litany of things that I have been obsessed with in really weird ways. And now I have a black house with a hearse out front and
oh
this weird
my
goth
gosh,
dad studio room.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I don't think I knew that, or maybe I did and I forgot. But where did you grow up, by the way? Where's hometown for you?
So I more or less, like, I was born in Germany. My dad was in the military. My mom was German, and we sort of moved around quite a bit for the first few years of my life. But we sort of settled down in Georgia, specifically like this Athens area that I live in now, which I've kind of left and come back to several times over again. I went to high school in a very rural part of Georgia that's like maybe 30 minutes outside of Athens. But like when I went to college and when I left the military, I came back to Athens because it's just such a wonderful music town, and it's just like a really cool place for creatives.
Absolutely.
It's got great histories.
Yeah. I have a lot of family in Georgia, so now I've got a good excuse. So I'll just have to go visit them, and then I get a cruise by Athens and check out I'll look for the house with the hearse. That's all I got to do, right?
It's not hard to find if you know Athens. It's close to downtown, so you just drive around downtown. You'll find it eventually.
That's amazing. Well, I guess, one of the things that I think is so cool about you and as you see people make videos on TikTok, and I love the community that we get a chance to build on there, because while we have to deal with, there's a lot of positive comments, there's a lot of good things to come out of it, but we have to deal with a certain amount of not so fun stuff when you put yourself out there online. But every creator that I've connected with that has a passion and love for music is a musician. I've just formed such a fast friendship with them, especially when we have generational ties, being closer in age. And right away I saw you and I saw the makeup and everything. It's so beautiful. I have to 100% just compliment you. You really are good at it. It looks incredible. You do things on your eyes and your face and everything that I'm so impressed by. And then the first time I saw you with it removed, I was like, whoa, look at those bright blue eyes. And then look at that guy, like a totally different face. And it was really cool to see. And that's where I discovered that you had, a military history and you'd been a fireman. And so you really have had a full life full of different exciting paths. So would you mind just sharing, I guess, with the audience a little bit about that journey best you can?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So like, to give you sort of the Cliff Notes version of like where my life has kind of led me, it's very bizarre. But when I was 17, I was working at this like car parts factory and a movie theater, so I had 2 jobs, and I was going to high school, but I was so dispassionate about that, so I just like literally dropped out, like kind of on a whim, because I was like,
really, I'm
not learning anything. Like my high school, so from a very young age, I started to see the like disproportionality of like equity of wealth in our country because of like the way that education is based off of property tax. The quality of your education is almost directly linked to whether the property taxes are high and whether people are rich, basically, whether homeowners are rich in your area. And Oglethorpe County is very rural Georgia, is not one of those places. So I was just so dispassionate and displeased with the level of education. So I just I was 17. I put in a request to leave. My parents agreed. They signed it. And then so I shortly after moved to Athens, which was, it's about 30 minutes from where I was growing up. And, Athens was just this like, especially at that point, this was like the early 2000s. So Athens was still this like booming hub of creatives and art. And it was still super, super cheap. Not anymore. It was incredibly cheap to live here. And that's why it was a incubator for artistry, and why it always has been since like the 70s, even onward. But, I fell in love with the scene here. Like, you can, and you still can. It's different. I'll talk about that later. But
sure,
you could go out any night of the week, and there would be like experimental techno night at like Tuesday night at Go Bar, or like the 40 Watt, there'd be like some crazy big band playing. And then the Caledonia Lounge around the corner, there was just like a smaller band just starting to learn their chops, but really amazing artistry. And dance parties, always just dance parties. And in fact, our bass player from our band used to DJ, and I used to be too young to get into Go Bar, and I used to sneak along the hedgerow.
I love it.
Occasionally I'd get kicked out, but sometimes I'd make it in. So, it was just this amazing experience. But along with when you're young, when you're 17, 18, 19, and you're constantly inundated with all of these choices of like really cool parties and like bands to go see and sort of music-based culture, you can kind of get stuck in the sort of like hamster wheel of time where you're just sort of in like Neverland and you don't feel like you're going anywhere. And I was very much so in that. Like I started to feel like, okay, and at that time I didn't even like party hard. I wasn't like drinking or doing like crazy drugs or anything, but I was just like, I don't feel like I felt like I didn't know where my direction was leading me and like what my path was supposed to be. And I was also like reading a lot of like French existentialist literature, like Camus and Sartre and all that sort of all that sort of stuff. And, so my dad was in the military for like 15, 16 years and became medically retired when he got hurt in a training incident. So, I grew up with that sort of in the back of my mind, was like, this is an option.
Right.
And at that point in time, both the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan were like in full swing, because this is like 2007 at this point. Okay. So I'm about 20. And I just had this like sort of breaking point where I realized that I was like, my life will never be horrible. Like, I'm happy here, but I'm never going to be able to do things that I could ever conceive of, because I don't feel like I'm breaking out of my comfort zone. And I think that's one of these things that really I probably learned too much from these French existentialists, was like, what's the meaning of a man? What do you call yourself a man? That's my terrible French accent. I loved it. Doesn't sound French.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful. Yes. You smoke the cigarette and you think about your life. But so I started to think about like, who am I and what is my impact on this world, and how am I going to sort of transcend myself? And I started to realize, I was like, I kind of need to do something that's like extreme and something that's big. So I certainly didn't. I was sort of like apolitical at that time. Like, I went through this like weird flirtation with like conservatism that it's like, whatever. Sure. And it was just sort of like, fair trade, and like we should just leave each other alone, which is not what they're advocating for in the background. But anyway,
right.
But I was, needless to say, mostly apolitical in a time of war, which is like kind of a dumb thing, and it's a very naive thing, because I went and I just like signed up, and I was like, I'm ready to do this. So I enlisted in the infantry. I was like a private first class because I had a couple college credits at that point. And, I did that for a few years, didn't deploy, and I got kind of frustrated because at that point I was sort of indoctrinated. And I was like, I want to go do this thing that I've been training to do, which is like so, again, naive and like just so full of hubris. But I basically started to see that I had like a knack for like organization and like just kind of like keeping my friends like motivated. While we were in the field and training and stuff. And I was like, I think I could maybe try like a shot at being a leader in the Army. So I applied, got into University of Georgia because I'd been taking college credits even as a high school dropout, which was awesome. I got accepted, and I went through like the Reserve Officers Training Corps to become an officer in the active Army. So I finished college in 2011, commissioned as an officer, and went through officers training, and basically got sent to Germany, picked up a rifle platoon in Germany in 2nd Cavalry Regiment, and we went to Kandahar, Afghanistan in 2013 to 14. And it was really weird because it was like the last official combat deployment. And our experience there was like pretty mild. It was like very nominal. Like, we took like indirect fire and stuff like that. But other than that, it was sort of like walking around trying not to get blown up.
Sure.
By IEDs and suicide bombers. And that stuff happened a lot where we were. So while we were there, you know, I had these 30 kids, and they were literally kids. They were like 21 was the average. It was like 20 or 21 was the average age of my platoon. So very young platoon.
Yeah.
Like most of them fresh out of high school.
Yeah.
And I started to kind of look around, and I read every book I could put my hands on about Afghanistan before we went over there, because I wanted to know, like, what is the culture? What's the history? Why are we doing this? Why are we still there at that point, 2013? You know,
right.
12 years into this thing.
Yeah.
And I basically just I started to sort of like tie all these strings together and was like, wow, this is a big business. Like, this whole thing of warfare has nothing to do with like protecting American democracy and freedom or our interests abroad. And I think it obviously at one point it very clearly had a necessity for us to be in Afghanistan and to remove that very brutal system of government under the Taliban, which there's no love lost for that system. Like, the Taliban is absolutely evil and awful, but what I started to see is like this subversion of this sort of American exceptionalist idea that like we are the paragons of freedom and peace and democracy in the world. So they use that to convince young kids to go die and kill. But in reality, it's like the only reason why we were still there was because of money, because of billions and billions and billions of dollars in contracts that were literally just being thrown into this furnace, this just like ultimate fire of waste and fraud and abuse. And it was just like, you know, so when we got back, fortunately everybody came home. We all got back from my platoon. My unit lost a couple people, which felt so needless. But we came home and got back to Germany, and I was just like, I started traveling a lot more, like, because I was already in Germany, and I was just like, they gave us some time off, and I just saw, I was like, you know, I just don't, this is not who I am, and this is not like aligning with my soul anymore. Right. So I basically put in resignation, got out, went into the reserves for a couple years and did like a company command in the Army Reserves. But not long after I got out, I thought I was going to go to grad school. I ended up joining a fire department in the Metro Atlanta area, and that's what I did for the last 5 years. I was a paramedic and a firefighter. So I did double duty. I would do one shift on the ambulance, and then the next shift I would be on the engine. And
incredible.
So I lived like this wild world of coming home and like going through fire school and paramedic school, which was so insanely like paramedic school was much harder. Like, I have a degree in religion, which is basically a history degree. That history degree does not hold a candle to how hard paramedic school was. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Wow.
So, but I loved it, and I was really good at being a medic. I was a pretty good firefighter. I mean, firefighting is kind of easy, to be honest. They won't tell you that, but like, you just go into a house and just like, unless it's like a big working fire.
Unless it's really bad, right?
Yeah. And then it gets like way different. But most 90% of fires, you just go in and it's kind of just fun. Like, not to make light of somebody's worst day ever, but you're just like, hell yeah! And you're just like putting water on fire. That's it. And there's just a lot of safety concerns. But being a medic, you save people's lives like all the time. You like, witness insane things, some really awful things, like like I have seen so many terrible things, and it was almost all in the role as a paramedic. I mean, just things that are unimaginable. But you know, it's so satisfying because at the end of the day, there's no moral gray area, and you still work in the context of a team. So it felt very comfortable for me. It was like being in the military without the like questioning of like, is this right? Or is like, what's going on here?
It's just
all
helping
you do
people.
Is you get the call, you run to the trucks, and you go do what you can to save people or help them. And it could be as simple as picking grandma up off the floor from the nursing home at 3 a.m. when you're like deliriously tired, or, you know, like literally doing CPR on a child, you know, and it's like, and you never know what you're gonna get. Like, it's just every call is just like, all right, here we go, you know. But so that's kind of like, that led me until now, and now I do music full time,
which is amazing.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I live a very marginal life now. Like I have to be very careful with my money because I'm not like, I think people have this like weird sort of expectation where like you build a large following on social media that like somehow you're just like immediately making a ton of money. I'm like, oh no, let me.
You don't have to
you.
tell me. People say that and assume that about me all the time, and I'm like,
No.
oh no, that's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. Maybe if you have a couple million and you get a brand deal, you could do something really comfortable.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
it's yeah. But when was your
I was
first?
actually watching.
Oh no,
ahead,
you
sorry.
finish your thought and then I'll go.
No, I actually funny talking about TikTok. I saw a TikTok talking about the group TLC and their record deal and how like whittled down it got, like because they sold like 10 million records or something. It was some astronomical amount of money, but like after the label and distribution and the lawyers, the sync agents, the whatever, they made like from 90, I think it was 94, 95. Each one of the members made $50,000 each that year.
Oh my god!
And they sold 10 million records. I was like, what? No way!
Yep, that's
I
that
see it.
creative
Like, I
accounting,
get it.
right? It's just like
Yep,
they figure out how to get it.
exactly.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. But when
crazy.
did you start? What I was going to ask was, when did TikTok begin? What year was it that this whole journey of yours began?
Sure, yeah. So during like it's good that I've given context because like during the lockdowns of the pandemic, the pre-vaccination, when we really didn't know the pathological like pathways, like we didn't know how bad or how good, not say good, or like how severe it was going to be. And so in the beginning, I was constantly exposed to COVID because I was taking all these people to the hospital all the time in the back of an ambulance, which is basically a big metal box with like a shitty ventilation system. Like
right.
There's a fan in the back, and you're like, that's not doing anything.
That's not going to
dude.
stop it. Yeah,
That's not doing anything. And we were like low on PPE for about 3 months. Like we were running out of N95s. I was just wearing like, this like little simple surgical mask, which does nothing to protect you, other than just like a physical barrier, but air is still circulating. I mean, there were all these like things. It was just like it felt apocalyptic.
It did.
So
I
needless
remember.
to say, I mean, it's just like, and I remember one day I pulled all the medics in my station aside before everything started. And I was like, hey guys, we don't know what this is going to be like. From the sound of it in China, this is going to be really bad. I was like, y'all need to be ready to die. I was like serious. I was like, you guys need to be ready to die because some of us probably will. Fortunately, the pathology didn't express that way. And I feel fortunate. But so while we were kind of figuring things out, I was super locked down. Like I didn't see anybody except for 3 people. And that was it because we were just so exposed. And I suddenly had this massive amount of time because like I'm a pretty like social gregarious person. Like I like to go out and I like to see shows. I mean, that's what I do in my free time. Now I make TikToks.
Yeah, now you make TikToks and play shows yourself.
That's all I do. Yeah. I'm just kidding. But so I, the firefighter schedule is 24 hours on, 48 hours off. So I had these like 48-hour chunks of time where it was just like, man, I can do whatever I want. So I started writing more music, and I started to read a lot about like, okay, well, how do I get this music out there? Like, what do I do to tell the story? Because I have a bizarre and interesting story, and I think that my messages are valuable. So like, and that's what I convey through music. So how do I get this out? And I started to just look at social media. So my first exposure to TikTok was like, I dated this girl several years back, and we used to just like watch. It was called like Musical.ly for a while.
Yeah, that's what it was originally. Yeah,
and it was just sort of like really cheesy, like cringy, like kids like and adults like just kind of like lip syncing, and it was just funny to me. It was just okay, and we just we would like watch it and laugh. But then I started to kind of watch it, and I was like, oh, there's like people promoting stuff. There's people telling stories. There's people doing like makeup stuff, which obviously I'm big into, and I've always been into since I was a teenager because of the goth scene.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is a really useful tool. But then I started to make like real, like just that kind of stuff. You go way back, you're going to see some really cringy Dusty Gannon Goth Dad stuff.
Now I'm going to do it. I'm going to scroll so deep. I can't wait. So this is a while ago then.
Yeah. I literally think they don't make it easy for you to scroll back that far as a deterrent because everybody's embarrassed of shit from like 2 years ago.
That's hilarious.
So like kind of what we were talking about before the show started, like I had this one video pop off because I was like, oh, it's trend based. So there's like these sounds and you replicate it and you just do this stupid thing. And it like, and you just show it, like you show who you are through the trend. Yeah. So I did a video where I was in my firefighter gear. And it was like the Wipe It Down challenge. So if you don't know what that was, like there was a mirror and the song went wipe it down. And you would wipe and it would just be a contrasted image. So I'm in my firefighter gear and I wipe. And then it's me looking like this. And I was like, ha! And I wipe back. And then I'm like, what the hell? And I'm back into my firefighter stuff. And it got viewed like millions of times. Like Amazing. It went absolutely supernova. And I was like scared. Because at that point I still had like the notifications on my phone for TikTok.
Oh my God. You were like, oh, I can't even imagine.
I was like, dude, I can't, no. Like, and it was a lot. And it was, but, so I went to work the next day and they were like, dude, you got to take that thing down. And I was like, I guess I have to. So I had to like delete this video. It had like millions of views and it felt like, oh my God, are we ever going to hit this again? And it's it's kind of silly to me now in retrospect, but like, that moment was like, this is the most valuable tool for musicians in the world right now. Yes. So I just started dumping every minute of free time that I had into this app. And I was just like, videos. Thousands of videos I think I've probably made by now. And most of it's just really dumb things, but it's a lot of me just like showing makeup stuff, telling stories, talking about the music, talking about our songs, talking about the meaning of things, how I make the music, showing little bits of music videos. There's so many things. It's so easy to make content. If you're a musician, you just have to like give a shit and like actually like commit yourself to doing it. Yeah. And that's the hardest part is just, it's honestly not even the minutia. It's just the swallowing your pride and going, I'm going to embarrass myself in front of thousands, if not millions of people on the internet.
It's vulnerability. It's being vulnerable. Yes. It requires a very sincereness of yourself. And, that's one of the reasons why when mine took off, I was surprised because for the first time ever, I wasn't going for virality. And it seems like the same with you. I wasn't trying. And my audience already knows this, but the quickest recap for you is that, I moved to Hollywood, Los Angeles, when I was in my 20s in 2001, and very different life than what you've been leading since then. But I mean, in terms of like, I didn't, deploy. But I was here pursuing this entertainment career, and so much of my life was spent, getting involved with a group of people making a web series, doing stand-up comedy in LA, making vines, making videos, really trying to promote myself as an entertainer, an actor, a comedian, and just working so hard to just be seen. Just look at me, writing screenplays, all this stuff. Yeah. And right when I made the decision to kind of give up, which was the height of the pandemic, I just said, I don't really care anymore. I'm happy with my day job. I'm happy with my family. I don't need to worry about it. And that first video being me not trying for a damn thing, just me sharing a thought, an idea. And so I think that the amazing thing about TikTok is it brings out, you saw the opportunity to take advantage for your music career. But people always ask me, they go, what do you think is the secret? And I say, the secret is yourself. It's you. And we're all so unique from one another. And it is very hard to be yourself. It's very hard to just drop all pretenses and show the world everything about who you are. And I think that is what stands out and why people connect and they grow their audiences, because it's hard to fake being, who you are. And all the things that I go back and look at that I was trying to get the attention, there was just this desperation on my face, deep down inside. You could see this, look at me, validate me. And I had to somehow let that go. I had to let that go. Like, I don't need your approval anymore. I'm pretty happy with my life. And by the way, these are things that I love. And and I also play music. And so that's what brought me to where I am. And it sounds like that is for you too. And it's an incredible platform because it equalizes everybody. And we never had anything like this before, because TikTok is the one thing that will take your video and show it to everyone, people who aren't following you. The whole algorithm and the metric behind it, which sometimes works against you, but it just shows you, as we know, as I talk to every other TikToker who comes on this show, I go, you have good days and then you have bad months where you're like, nothing is going anywhere. It's so weird. But anyway, so what a fascinating journey that led you to making TikTok. And I do want to say, because we said it off the air, and you said briefly, they made you take it down. It was because the fire department had issue with you kind of showing that you were a fireman, right? That was the problem.
It was such a dumb week, because I remember going to work and I kind of was like, I know that these dudes have seen this, because it was viewed millions of times in a day.
In a day, yeah.
In one 24-hour period, it was 2 million views or something.
Insane.
And I was like, holy shit. Because how many goth firefighters do you know? You know what I mean? That's the whole point of it.
Wait, Dusty, wait. I know there's another
out the Rolodex.
There's another goth fireman in my life. I know it. No, you're the only one I know.
I've met a few now, and it's awesome. I've been through shows and stuff, but so I went to work though, and it was immediate. This one dude who I'm really good friends with, he's also left the fire department to start a business, but he came up to me and he was like, dude, you're gonna be in for it today. And I was like, how many people have seen it? He's like, dude, everybody's
seen it.
Everybody. They were I think the fire department I worked for had 1,000 firefighters roughly. He was like, everybody. And I was like, all right, and I've always been weird, and they knew that.
Sure.
I've had that hearse, and they know that I do this weird stuff, but they hadn't seen it.
Right.
Because I wasn't here, look at me doing all this shit that you're going to make fun of me for.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they were very well aware
very
of it.
Exposed.
And it was man, it was hi man, because they're all
Southern.
Hi man.
Yeah, that's my family out there. Georgia.
Hey dude, what's with all this queer makeup stuff? And this is before I was out as bisexual too, so I was like, it's just Kiss, Kiss wears makeup. I do the same thing. Yeah. They're like, oh, okay, man, well, that's cool, I guess, whatever. And it was just funny to me, but and then so I had this lieutenant, and he's a great dude, but he was very by the book. Right. And he was like, man, you got to delete it, man. I mean, I hate it. I hate to ask you to do that, because I know you're trying to get your stuff out there and da da da. And I was like, look, I'm gonna put it to you like this. We have this weird social media policy where we can't be in uniforms and stuff. There are dudes posting pictures of themselves on every platform, on Instagram, all of this stuff, and they're in their stuff and nobody cares. But the second that somebody's a little weird that does it, it's a big deal.
Right.
But I just took it in stride, deleted it, and I sort of used that as the impetus to do it again. But in a different way. Because it's well, you guys already know I'm a firefighter full time, so now it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You can get it out there. I don't have to be in this.
Yeah.
And that first viral, the first thing that goes, I felt in the early days when something goes, it was, at least for me, it got duplicated a couple times. I was able to do it a couple times right out of the gate. And then as my channel grew and things went on, it was harder to duplicate. It happens every now and then, but those things that really catch, you're really just more dependent on your core audience that likes your stuff. And then you occasionally, the other things that I've had have been when I get out of music and I do something odd, and then people get really emotional about whatever that post is. But you and I have some Southern ties. I don't know if you knew this about me, but I'm originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma, which isn't the deep South, but I am.
It's in there, though.
It's in there, and I'm from a place where people go, "Hey, Jacob, what you're into is a little weird," because I was, when I was in high school, I was an actor. I was in musical theater, song and dance, jazz hands, the whole 9 yards. And let me tell you something: in the '90s, that was definitely a weird time to be into that, and people had opinions, and so I have a lot of that background. And then another thing you said, which is a whole nother podcast, because I think I want to get into bands and I want to get into music, but you said that you had a degree in religion, and I was like, oh man. So you were talking earlier about how you grew up and you were exposed to the horror movie and you were raised in Germany and you had this good assessment of the world around you and the political system, the military. And I was like, man, talk about me who went through life like literally, hands over my eyes, because I'm growing up in Tulsa. I'm in the church. I'm a Methodist, church going kid, and all the music I like, I'm getting in trouble for all the time. I'm going to Christian summer camps, and I'm being asked to get rid of secular music and throw it away. And, my brother and I would come home and be filled with religious conviction and I can't believe I'm going to let go of this album. And then 2-3 months later, we'd find a way to get it again. And my mother, we told her, my brother and I are huge metal fans, death metal and stuff like that. And I told her, I was like, sadly, Mom, all the times you're afraid of our metal and you made us get rid of it, it just re-supported the love, and now Joel and I are into the heaviest shit in the world, and we have you to thank. So, but I grew up like that, and it wasn't until I was much older that I sort of came out of that culture, and it changed my life, and it changed the way I assess things. And I moved to Los Angeles as a young 20-something guy trying to make it in entertainment, but I did a lot of my growing up and learning about the world and how things work later. It's like I felt like I spent a lot of years being pretty naive and pretty sheltered, and even those first few years living in Southern California, which is not a place where you do well if you're naive, but I was really, I learned quickly in a lot of different ways. And it's just been an interesting journey. But the religion thing I did want to hit on, because I was like, man, we should just have a part 2 to where we can talk about that. But was it in a specific religious wheelhouse, or what?
Yeah, I mean, my BA is just in religion generally. Yeah. So and a bachelor's degree is just such a one of the things you learn when you get your bachelor's degree in anything is how little you know about that thing at the end of it. Or I was like, you're literally giving me a degree in this, saying that I know, and I mean it's literally this much, but I focused mostly on Chinese religions, so Taoism, Buddhism, and Confucianism were my primary interests, because I find I was becoming really highly interested in their meditative and mindfulness practices, which I think are absolutely vital to living a more fulfilled life. Is just, even if you're not doing a sort of meditation where you're sitting there and clearing your mind, but there are meditative practices. For me, it's playing music. It's getting lost into the writing process where my mind just kind of dissolves, and I'm just sort of focusing on the sound almost entirely, and letting everything else of this external world just sort of move away from me. And those are things that I really learned from reading a lot of these, Taoist, especially Taoist books, and primary source material. A lot of it was complete nonsense too, that didn't make any sense to my white guy in 21st century mind. But I just found it fascinating and beautiful. But I did study a lot of the Abrahamic traditions as well, because especially going back to the army, I was like, well, I should probably know a lot about Islam. So I learned a lot about Islam, but also Christianity, and it just sort of it really just changed the way that I viewed the world, because I was sort of how I used to be very apolitical. I was sort of religious.
Right.
I didn't care. I was like, this doesn't affect me, and I don't have any real opinions. Whereas now I have, I think, a much more broadened view on how religion works and why it's so important to humans and culture and the decisions that humans make. And it's really emboldened a lot of my opinions about how religion especially ties into government power, why certain marginalized groups are further marginalized because of religious culture identity, and how that ties into politics. And it's just like, it's really kind of sad and abhorrent to me, but
it is. I know. And we don't have to go down that rabbit hole, but that's the same. The last thing I'll say on it is when I started to study into Abrahamic and Judeo-Christian, like Judaic ideas, that's really where the unraveling began, because the more you know, the more you learn, the more you research, you start to go, some of these things are borrowed from other places, and this all doesn't make sense. And a lot of the translations from, Jewish culture to Christian culture don't quite connect. And a lot of these were fulfilled because of, they needed to make a statement to the people at the time, and they needed to govern a certain way. So once I started to learn all that, it's really what began to dismantle it. But I've had in the past, this all happened when I was 26, 27 is where I departed. And it's been a long time now, 16 years. And I now am patient and now understanding there's still things that get me enraged that I see people post online and get so mad. But I had to spend a couple years where I was really mad. I was really angry, and I had to spend a couple years kind of purging and getting rid of that anger. And now I look at it and I can see the significance and the value in, having a mother and father who are still involved in it. I have to raise my boys to have a tremendous amount of patience and love and understanding and being like, I get why this means so much to you, and not be smarmy. I don't want a bunch of Bill Maher's running around my house going, oh, we're going to pray. Okay. He's hilarious, but he's so smarmy about religion that I was like, I don't want them to grow up about like that. Actually.
And I think that it's like, at the end of the day, there's this sort of like unknowable aspect to it too, right?
Yeah,
like,
of course.
There's aspects of religion that are insanely beautiful and responsible for like some of the best things that humanity has had to offer. Yeah. But you've got to learn to separate sort of this like hard line scriptural literalism to the reality of humanity and how people work. And because it's like, if you're that's why like people ask me like, what's your political ideology? Like, what are you, Democrat, are you Republican, or whatever? I'm like, no, I don't like any of them. I don't like any political party, because the second that you subscribe to a process, an ism, you are bound by a left and a right limit, and none of these things are going to be 100% accurate.
Right.
So why not like go, well, you know what? I like that, and I also like this, and just build your own sense of ethics from how you interpret the world and how you interact with other people. And I think that's like so much better than just being like, well, there's a book and that thing has all the answers. Like, no.
Yeah. You and I are on the same wavelength, and I knew we'd be best of friends. So I knew it.
I knew it too.
I knew it. I could tell from the moment we connected. So, but now that our audience has been so patient and listened to us talk about Dusty's journey, they're like, the title of this episode was Joy Division. I logged in. So let's get into Joy Division. All that stuff, though. I wanted them to know who you were and just see what a cool, fascinating life you'd had. And I wanted us to have that chance. This was selfish, guys. Sure. I wanted the time with Dusty. You have to have it too. But let's talk about Joy Division. This was a cool album because every guest, I always ask them, I say, what's the album? What's the album? And I have two responses that come from this. A lot of times the guests go, there's so many that I could cite. And that's fine. That's a fair thing. But it cracks me up because I'm the same. If somebody said, what is the one album? It's like you just came out of the gate and you said, oh, there's no question. There's no question. I know exactly what it was. And it was...
it was Unknown Pleasures by Joy Division.
1979. What an album. And I'm glad you chose it because I haven't really, I haven't gone back to that era yet on the show, which I know I will over time as the show continues on. But this is an album that I want you to talk about that moment. And then I want to share, my experience with it as well. But I want you to talk about discovering the album, what it did to you, and how it drove your musical journey in the biggest way. That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah. So, there was this like weird period of time in my early teenage years. So I was about 13 or 14 where I was discovering like post-punk and goth rock, which is such an interchangeable thing.
Sure.
So for those people that are like, Joy Division isn't a goth band, I'm like, I don't care, man.
Right.
Like that's my response to that is like, whatever, dude. But I was getting into that music, this music that I've been obsessed with for now, like probably 22 years,
Right.
That I've never left. And I'll never forget the first time I heard Joy Division specifically was like, I had like some level of like very early, it was either an MP3 player, like one of the stick ones, or it was a burnt CD. But somebody had made me a playlist of like sort of this music that I had started to get into, and I was my mom was driving me home from school, and I was finally allowed to like listen to this. It was a CD because my friend gave it to me, and we were driving home, and I was sitting there with my little compact portable Discman with the anti-skip technology,
Of course.
and and I'm sitting there and I'm listening to a couple songs, and they're all cool, and it's it's good stuff. It's like a lot of Bauhaus, some Susie, and then that bass line from Disorder starts up. And it's just like within the first 5 seconds of that song, it's so sparse. There's really nothing crazy going on.
Yeah.
It's really just that bass line with the drums. It's just a rhythm section with some like kind of bizarre sounds in the background. But it captured this feeling, this sentiment that I had felt as long as I have been conscious and like aware of myself and as a sentient being, that like, I've always been kind of a little strange. And, I grew up in some, like, my family was amazing, but we had some really hard times, like, within their family.
Sure.
And I was very young when some of that really bad stuff happened. And so I this sort of music was already resonating with me, but there was something about that bass line and that rhythm section that just spoke to this, like, beautiful, nostalgic sadness that I think everybody sort of lives with at some point in their life. Some people live with it for a few days, some people their entire lives. But it was like, I always like to say this about that song. When it started playing, it was like, that is the sound of the way I have felt for so long about so many things. And then, the song just sort of explodes into this immediate recognition of that strangeness, where Ian Curtis says, I've been waiting for a guide to come and take me by the hand to make me feel the pleasures of a normal man, or paraphrase. But like that I was like, yeah, exactly. Wow. Like, yes. I am weird, and I am trying to find some sense of connectivity to that weirdness to the rest of the world, when I feel like, I was one of maybe 2 or 3 like kind of weird gothy alternative kids in my school, in a rural school, Yeah. And I mean, it was just like, and it just blew my mind. And then I went home, and that was when the internet was still like kind of new to everybody. Like, we were still on dial-up, and it was like, it was terrible. But I remember like immediately going and finding the whole record and just learning everything I could about this band, and just seeing immediately, oh wow, like he died.
Yeah.
And he did it by his own hand, and reading the history, and it's like this sort of extremely tragic tale of these amazing, prodigious musicians who had so much poetic beauty and ability that was beyond their own comprehension, and they were just kids. And I was like, man, that is it. The whole thing about it, it was just something that was just so, it felt vital and it felt important. And then I listened to the whole record that night, and I was like, every single song on this record is phenomenal. There's not one bad moment, not one.
This is why I do this show, because whenever this subject comes up about the album, and when the people find it and they land on it, and you just did it right now, the way you communicated it to me, I literally was like, you saw me, I was just like, oh, when you said that bass line is how I feel. And I was like, that's how I experience music. It's always been really linked to my emotions. And I am somebody who often completely misses lyrics. I often just know what the sound is, and I'll discover lyrics from time to time. It's not that I don't hear them, because sometimes they're so painfully clear or sweetly clear or happily clear. But it locks into the feeling in my body.
Yes.
And that's why I make the videos that I do. And when you just described that, I was like, that's a really perfect way of describing that bass line, that album. And Joy Division is a band that when I was a kid, my brother was a few years older than me, and he was his favorite band of all time is The Cure. That was his band. So his room had the Boys Don't Cry poster, and every day he would come into my room and he would go, Jake, listen to this one here, because he was always trying to convince me that I was going to love The Cure as much as he did, right? He was trying to do it to me.
Yeah.
And he was trying to win me over. And I love them. But when I was 13, I was listening to heavier stuff. And he had Joy Division, he had New Order, he had Bauhaus, he had all that stuff. But for me, it just wasn't resonating for me as a teenager yet. I was glomming on to other music. And so it wouldn't be until years later. I mean, first of all, you can't deny the fact that Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures, that album cover, is probably in the top 10 most identifiable album covers of all time. I even chose this shirt today because it was the closest thing I had. I don't have the shirt. I need to get the shirt. This is a Sigur Rós tour shirt, but it was like black with the white. And I was like, it's close. It's close.
Yeah.
But I that is a very recognizable sound. And then just recently, last year, I got to go see Peter Hook and the Light because I got to be friends with his son, Jack Bates, who's playing with the Smashing Pumpkins. And so I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
I want to show you something.
Okay, here you go.
I'm listening.
No, it's okay. I wanted to make sure if you had an emergency, I wanted to stop.
No.
But I got a chance to see Peter Hook and the Light, and now I was familiar with the songs. Now I knew New Order. Now I knew Joy Division. And man, I was sitting there that night, and that bass line started up, and I got so pumped. I was like, yeah, and I was so thrilled. And so when you chose this one, I was like, I really haven't got a lot of time. And I think it's fascinating that I didn't know, because I've never been in the goth community. I've been at it adjacently. I have plenty of friends who are. And I think it's so cool, and I watch it and I go, I want to do that too. Like, I want to dress and I want to be in the, I made a fucking vampire movie, dude. Like, I love the fucking dark shit, but I've always been on the side, and it was like that feeling that I think is just so cool and so amazing. And anyway, I'm so glad you chose this album, and you're about to show me something cool.
Okay, so talking about Peter Hook and the Light, so when I was leaving the military, so I was leaving from Germany. I was going to take 3 months of like this sort of what's called terminal leave. It's like it's like any bit of leave you have left, you can either have it paid out to you, or you can take it and just take like whatever time off. Yeah. So I took 3 months of leave that I had accrued, basically. And I went on a huge trip all over the world. I went to like China and Japan and all this crazy stuff. But the weekend before I left, my war buddies it was just the last couple guys that were still in the unit, because this is a couple of years after we got back. And they were like my best friends, and they're still some of my really good friends, even though I don't see them as much as I'd like. But it's just a very specific kind of friendship that you form in that place. But they saw that the weekend before I was leaving, Peter Hook and the Light were playing in Prague in Czech Republic, which was like an hour and a half from where we lived in Germany. So they're like, dude, we gotta go. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So me and my two friends went to Prague, and it was in this like weird like venue that's like in a basement. It's like a bomb shelter or something, and it's like 2 stories but sub levels, and then there's like a stage. So there's like a balcony, and it looks over the stage, and then the GA floor, but it's all underground. So we got like there super, super early because I'm like, dude, this is one of my favorite musicians, one of my favorite bands. We've got to go see this like as soon as or as early as we can. We got right up on the stage. You know, they come out, and I mean, it's like 5 foot of separation between me and Peter Hook, and his son Jack was playing.
Yes,
which was really cool.
yes.
And I was just like, this is so awesome. And it was one of the Joy Division tours, so it was like mostly Joy Division, a couple New Order tracks. I believe there were a couple New Order tracks. Nah,
He played a bunch
not.
at mine too.
Yeah, but you know, so basically we're right there, and I'm just like pounding pilsners and just
Love it.
I mean, I'm in heaven.
Yeah.
And I'm just absolutely. It's like the army is over for me. Like I'm leaving this thing that I don't believe anymore. My two of my best friends are here with me. They're having a blast. Like, and it just felt. It was like, man, this is so important. You know, this night is so important because this is like me moving on.
Yeah.
And so they played 3 sets or 2. I guess there's 2 main sets and an encore.
Right.
And in between the second set and the encore, they're coming back out. And at this point, I'm a little sauced. And I'm like, so they have, the green room is weird. There's like stairs that lead off from the stage down to another basement, like sub level.
Right.
So they're coming like up from the green room.
Yeah.
And so they're walking up these stairs and we're like right there. And I was like, Peter fucking Hook! And he's like, he's smoking the cigarette and he goes, fuck yeah. And he hands me his cigarette. And like, I'm at that point, I hadn't smoked since like Afghanistan or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like ripping this Marlboro menthol. And I was just like, and I'm like, hell yeah. And I'm like looking, but I'm like still kind of fixated. And I look over at my friends and they're like,
Yeah, right?
and that's when it hit me. And I was like, holy shit.
I'm smoking Peter
So I
Hook's
smoked
cigarette.
this cigarette and I put it out and I put it in my pocket because you're not allowed to smoke technically. And the bouncer was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
was
Peter
like,
Hook
shit. Well,
can
Peter
do it,
Hook,
but
man.
you can't.
Yeah.
Right.
So I pocket this. So they play the encore and it's just absolutely amazing. They finish with Love Will Tear Us Apart.
Yes.
And so my friend Eric, he's this like tiny like Scandinavian guy. He's real short, but he's real stocky, and he's just like he's a bulldog. And he had this like kind of weird look on his face, and I was like, he's a little drunk. Like I was like, what are you doing? And he's like, hold on, man. And he jumps over. So they left the stage.
Mm-hmm.
He jumps onto the stage, grabs the set list, balls it up, and throws it back at me. And I was like, oh, caught it. And these giant Czech bouncers just grabbed him. And I was like, oh no, we are about to have to fight these dudes to save Eric's life. And the guys I mean, this dude's like 7 foot. I'm not kidding.
Right.
He's huge. And he's got Eric up in the air by his scruff. And he's like, why do you do this? And Eric goes, look behind us, man. There are like nothing but these like really hot goth girls. We were never getting that set list, man.
Oh my
And the guy goes, yeah, you're right. And he just let him go.
Oh my God. That is the best story.
So anyway, I have
That's amazing.
the cigarette butt and the set
Dusty,
list.
that is glorious. That is so
And,
glorious.
Yeah, it was just such a wonderful, as you can see, I mean, it's pretty much the entire discography.
Yeah, it really is.
And it was just such a cool moment.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah, if you ever get a chance, listeners, if you ever get the chance to go see Peter Hook and the Light, it is absolutely worth every last cent. It's
absolutely
incredible.
If you are a Joy Division or New Order fan, I thought he did so good. I was watching him. I was talking to Jack afterwards, and I was like, here's your dad who's like 67, and he's just running around stage playing. He's in great shape and just still has all this energy. This was, it was just a remarkable. And I was like, that's exactly where I want to be at his age, man. I want to be doing the same kind of shit. And he was just it was so good. And I remember I posted the video, and somebody in my comments, was like, I had the best time. And they were like, well, blah, blah, blah. And they kind of criticized. They were like, well, because Hooky can't sing. I think it was somebody from England. And I was like, I was kind of like, I disagree. I actually thought he really had that Ian Curtis energy. I thought it was in the tone in his voice. I thought he did a really good job. And I thought it was great. I wasn't at all sitting there and going, "Oh, this doesn't sound good." I've seen bands where the lead singer can't sing, Motley Crue, and and I'm like, "Oh no." But it was remarkable, and I love that you have that set list. And what a cool story! What year was that? Do you think in the Czech?
That was 2016.
2016.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because it was right before I left for that trip. It was the week before I left.
That's amazing. That is amazing. I was going to say, there was something else I was going to say about this album that I wanted to say. You probably know a ton of it, but I was trying to do, because I always like to come into my shows like researching and knowing some stuff. You probably already knew that on the original vinyl, I don't know if they've recreated it, but on the Runoff Groove, on each side, it had it said "Step Inside, This Is the Way." So on each side, it had that in the Runoff Groove, which was pointing to Atrocity exposition.
Oh, right.
And so they put it on the original thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think it's "This Is the Way." And I was like, wow, they were the Mandalorian before the Mandalorian.
Yeah. Exactly.
But that was a cool thing that I was reading about. And then I was reading about just that these guys, they were kids, they were doing it on the weekends, recorded it over 3 weekends, like staying up all night long. And that what's the other thing? Oh, and that when they got the album done, Peter and Barney didn't like it. They were like, they were coming from a much more punk, heavier style. And they went home, and it was, spacey and ambient and real, ethereal. And they were like, no. And the other two were very happy. But it's just amazing that they didn't realize that they would literally be making a record that would inspire thousands and thousands of artists for years to come.
Right.
And how, this is what I was going to say earlier about the goth scene. I can't believe that people don't consider it a goth record or in the goth scene. Because I was like, it kind of is one of the godfathers of the whole scene, isn't it? So,
well, I mean, that's like something, I won't go too far into this, but I'll just put it to you like this. Like, there is a huge amount of like really tasteless, shitty, boring discourse about what is goth music or not.
Yeah.
And like, so this is what I'll say about goth music. It absolutely is. You might be hearing a train. There's a train that goes right by my house.
I have noise outside like crazy today. And I was like, of all the days, there's a dog barking, a construction truck. I'm like, you guys, I am talking to Vision Video himself. So
excuse me, train.
Excuse me.
But no, so I'll say this, like goth rock especially, but goth music is definitely a genre in the same way that like metal, that pop, that classical jazz, R&B, all of these genres exist, and there are like certain relative guidelines to like what makes like you wouldn't take say Metallica and be like, this is a jazz band.
Right.
No,
Can't do it.
It's just not.
Yeah.
It's sort of outside of those general guidelines. Maybe they have a couple riffs that are jazz
maybe
riffs.
Kirk Hammett's throwing some jazzy licks in there, but it's not
I'm sure
jazz.
he did. I mean, most rock and roll comes from jazz, guitar stuff.
Yeah.
So, but the problem is that with goth music, it was never intended to be goth music. And what I mean by that is when you look at the music history, because I'm a huge music history nerd, like I just read books about all the bands that I'm interested in because I think it's fascinating being a musician, just like learning the pitfalls, but also seeing like where they succeeded and like where they took risks that paid off and all this sort of stuff. So goth music, came from post-punk music. So there's this like sort of, group of weirdos and musicians that are leaving the punk rock scene because it's sort of getting appropriated by record industries.
Sure.
Sort of making boy bands that are like, here's the new punk group.
Right.
And they'd like label it with punk literally. And it's like, here you go, buy this. So all these sort of like more avant-garde weirdos from that scene, like the Susies and the Peter Murphys and all these kind of people, they started to sort of go, well, let's do this again, but our own way. It's like that book, Rip It Up and Start Again. It's a great intro. I can't remember his name. This guy's name's Simon something or another, but the book is awesome, and it's just a great explanation and history of post-punk. It's a little dry, but it's great.
Okay.
But anyway, so you have all these people, and they're like, really interested in like the macabre and like, horror movies and like all this kind of weird stuff. There's this like fascination with androgyny and the flirtation with sort of dark imagery, but a lot of it's very tongue in cheek.
Mm-hmm.
They're not calling it anything. They're just making music. Bauhaus, Sisters of Mercy, 45 Grave, Christian Death, Susie and the Banshees, on and on and on. The Cure. All these bands are making this bizarre music that kind of sits in the same realm, like reverbed out chorusy guitars and really operatic, very melodramatic vocals, lyrics that have flirtation with the macabre, but can also be very like insane and party like. 45 Grave, party time, man. But none of these people are calling it goth. It's not until the mid to late 80s where this sort of media influence goes, what do we call these people? Well, they call them death rockers in LA, and they call them cure heads in London, and they call them whatever and whatever. And then somebody latched on to this sort of like description of the Doors at one point where they said, it's like a gothic band. And then they sort of moved that. And Susie Sue once said like, we have sort of a gothic sound about us. So it started to kind of come out because it makes sense. Gothic literature is
absolutely
atmospheric. But once they had this term, this sort of brevity term to like sell it, that's when it started to like get kind of watered down or not watered down, but like
it saturated. Just
like, and then all these bands start coming out as goth bands, which I know is ironic because we sort of label ourselves that. But I have a metaphor for it now because we now exist in a time where like we're sort of post goth being like, we're not goth.
Sure.
It's sort of like and I love using this metaphor because it's so hilarious to me. In zombie movies now that come out and everybody's like, what are these things, these monsters, these walkers, these roamers? It's a fucking zombie.
We
man.
all know it.
It's a zombie. Let's just call it a goddamn zombie and move on. It's like, it's sort of the same thing. It's like, it's a goth band. But the thing that I love about the goth genre now is that there's so much music that's coming out within the genre. There's so many amazing artists and musicians that exist in this giant umbrella. And there's sort of like dark wave, there's cold wave, there's industrial EBM, there's gothic rock, there's goth metal, and it all works and it all fits under there. And it's like, who cares about this label? Like, just enjoy the fucking music, and have a good time with it. And I always say that to people who are like, Joy Division isn't goth. I'm like, okay, do you want to know if a goth band is goth or not? Go to a club, a goth night club, and listen to the music. Do they play Joy Division? Yes. It's a goth band.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like,
who cares?
Who
man?
cares? Who cares? And I mean, this scene stuff, on another level in the metal community, it's the same thing. We have the same problem. We have all these people that are like, what is real metal? What is death? Yeah. What is deathcore? What is in melodic death metal? It just goes on and on and on. And the elitist mentality, you're so relieved when you meet others that you're like, I don't care. Honestly, it's it's part of it. So it seems to find its way in every community, in every art form. There's my friend once made a podcast that I was on called Well Actually, and I loved it because it was making fun of the well actually, and you just can't escape, Star Wars, fucking Harry Potter, whatever it is. It's like there's just always the people that come along and they well actually you to death. And it's like I get well actually on Smashing Pumpkins, and I'm like, bro, do you want to? Do you really want to dance? Because I will school you.
Yeah,
I will school you. This is my world. And like somebody will, and I'm sure you get it too. I'm sure people all the time come after you.
Unbelievable. Like I recently had like this huge group of people on the like goth subreddit. That just went on this like, we hate Vision Video Fest, and I was like, okay, I mean, I'm cool with it because you're talking about us.
Yeah, right.
People are gonna go, who's that you're hating on so much? Like, because most of it was like, I hate Goth Dad because he's a cringy.
I love that. I love that you do that,
dude. Like, but the thing about these people, whether it's the goth scene or any scene, any music subculture or any scene of any media or culture whatsoever, is that they are almost always terminally online people. These are not conversations that people are having at events.
No.
Like, you're not at a show. You're not like at Peter Hook and the Light and some guy's like, well, you know, a lot of people call these guys gothic rock, but I personally call them first wave post-punk. And it's like, shut the fuck up.
Right.
I'm trying to
watch Peter Hook. He's about to throw a cigarette at me.
Like, come on, man. Like, who cares? Like, you won't hear that.
Yeah.
Because those people are, I mean, I hate to say it, but most of those people are just like kind of insufferable.
Yeah.
And they sort of dump their entire personality into these like dumb online arguments that don't go anywhere and are like total circuitous dumb things. It's just like,
I agree.
Just let it go and have a good time.
Have a good time. And I mean, that's the one thing we gain as we get older and wiser, as you let go of those kind of stupid things. And I've kept you on for a very long time, so I know I probably gotta at some point in time let you go. But I want to talk about Vision Video.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. You're gonna laugh because I am 100% certain now that we're talking about Joy Division. I'm like, oh, Vision. So that's in the title itself, isn't it?
Yeah. So Vision Video, the name, actually, so I do love that it does have that like.
Oh, okay, so it's more coincidental than anything.
Oh, yeah, it is actually pretty coincidental, but I mean, when we decided on it, I was like, it is kind of cool, like
nice.
The Vision,
Yeah.
So Vision Video was the name of a local like punk rock version of Blockbuster here in Athens, Georgia.
Nice.
They had about 4 or 5 locations. It was just a video rental store.
Yeah.
Run by mostly college kids from the art school at UGA. You would go in there, and like that was my exposure to like horror, because like there was, I'll never forget, like the Broad Street location, there was this cute punk rock girl that worked there, and she was obsessed with horror, and I was like 17. I didn't know how to talk to girls or dudes at that point. I was just like, I was like, you're cute. Like, what do I say to you to make you think I'm cool? So I would go in there and I'd be like, hey, what do you think? I like these movies. What do you think I should watch? And she's like, oh, you should watch this. Like, this is really, really bad, but you'll love it. Like,
yeah.
And it's just like, there was this concern for the customers. Like, it was a communal experience. Like, you go in, and the guy that you were talking to last week who recommended you watch Evil Dead was like, oh, hey, you should watch this terrible movie that Peter Jackson made called Bad Taste. It's awesome. It's terrible. You'll love it. And so there were also like flyers for all the shows every week. They changed them every week. And so you always just felt like you're connected to the community. And one thing that I miss about the world back then is that, so nowadays, a lot of our taste is dictated by a fucking algorithm.
100%.
Just in so many ways. Like what we see on TikTok to what we listen to on Spotify, what literally comes up in the Spotify radio.
Right.
There's this lack of human curation.
Right.
Where we lose the granular texture of what makes things wonderful. And it's just sort of like passed on to a line of code.
Wow. Well said, dude. Well said.
And I miss that about movie stores, and I miss that about so many things. And I think there's a lot of themes in our music that speaks to sort of this longing and nostalgia for stability and being okay when you're not okay. And so there was just like parallel. And so we spent like 3 months trying to come up with a name, because that's actually one of the hardest parts of being in a band, is coming up with a good name.
Of course.
And my drummer, Jason Fusco, who's an amazing drummer, he's in a really great punk rock band called She He He. I highly recommend. You'll love them.
Okay, I'll check them out.
She He He. Awesome. Great music.
Yeah.
But one day he like popped into the group chat and he was like, hey, what if we call ourselves Vision Video, like the video store? And I was like, it's perfect.
It's perfect.
Because everybody in Athens knows it. And another thing I'll say about it is that Athens has changed dramatically. Mm-hmm. It has become pretty homogenized. There's been this massive influx of like very wealthy people. A lot of students that are going to UGA's parents have bought a lot of the property around here.
Right.
So this huge amount of money has flowed into the town, which is good in some ways. But it's like really tough to live here now. Like if you don't own a home, if you're renting, it's extraordinarily expensive to rent here. So a lot of the artists have gone. A lot of the cool, weird stuff is gone.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of these like weird franchises and shit that are downtown instead of music venues. And I'm like, that's not the Athens I grew up in.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up in punk rock, weird, kind of dangerous, but awesome Athens. So this was just a way for us to sort of keep this one little thing alive. And then every now and then, you know, we'll play a show or something, and people will be walking by and they're like, you know, you're talking about your show, and it's like, oh yeah, I play in a band called Vision Video, and they're like, oh, like the video store, man, cool. And you're like, yeah. And it's one of those things. It's like immediately you have this bond over this bygone thing. So that's where that name
I
came
love
from.
it. I love that I knew the story. And I do think it's cool that you are inspired, and that the big album that really changed your life was Joy Division, and it has that vision, you know, it has that connection. It's just it's a nice coincidental thing. I immediately, when we talked about this album, I was like, oh, there's the link, but that's even cooler that it ties to that. And I had a similar experience growing up. We didn't have necessarily like a local video store that I remember. I mean, I think we were stuck on some pretty like chain stuff because this is Tulsa, Oklahoma, but we did have record stores like that were a big deal. But I was going to say, you mentioned Peter Jackson and Bad Taste. My friends and I all did the same thing. We became obsessed with watching bad movies, like weird off-kilter films. It all started, we saw Ed Wood. And as soon as we saw Ed Wood, we were like, let's get Plan 9. Let's get Glenn or Glenda. Let's get the movies. Yes. And then once that opened, then it was like, all right, let's get Bad Taste. Let's get Evil Dead. Let's get Meet the Feebles. Let's watch every fucked up thing we can find. And so that was a big part of my youth as well. So linking it together to a video store is such a cool idea. And I love that it has that link to that hometown feel for you. But yeah, man, this has been amazing. And before we wrap up the show, I wanted to say, is there anything that we can help promote for you? Are you going to be going on the road soon? Are you playing shows soon?
Yeah, so you know, we're about to start a very long year of touring. This year is already shaping up to be unbelievable, sort of unprecedented for us. So like in about 2.5 weeks, we will be doing about a week and a half down from here in Athens all the way down Florida to Miami Beach and back.
Amazing.
We'll have about a week and a half off, and then we will start this like month-long tour where we go from Athens out to Austin for South by Southwest with dates along the way. Then we will be shooting up towards Parsippany, New Jersey for this big goth and industrial festival called Dark Force Fest.
Cool.
And up to as far north as Montreal, Canada, and then back down the East Coast. So all those dates have tickets. That's all on our website at visionvideoband.com if you're in the US. But what I'm really excited about is this year we will be going to Europe twice.
Yes.
We will be going to play a very good slot at the what's called the Wave Gothic Treffen Festival. It's basically the biggest goth rock festival in the world, and it takes place in Leipzig, Germany. So we will be playing there on June 28th. And basically what we're going to do is before that, for about 2 weeks, we're going to fly into probably Spain or Portugal, and we're going to make our way east to Germany to play that festival. Then immediately after that festival, the next day, we're going to fly to somewhere in England, probably London, and we're going to be doing 10 dates opening up for the seminal goth rock band The March Violets from the 80s. So we're super excited to be able to play with them. And then later in the year, in August, we'll be going out to California and doing so we'll see you there.
I'm going to see you. We're going to hang out. We got to hang out somehow.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And we usually take a couple days off in LA and because we have so many friends there. So absolutely. But we're going to do a sort of a West Coast tour through the month of August. And then at the end of the year, we will be coming back to Germany for the Cold Hearted Festival in Dresden, very appropriately named because it will be very cold in Dresden, Germany. Wow. But I think around that, we're going to do some German dates and then some Eastern Europe and then probably Italy as well.
Amazing. Full year.
Other than that, like we're actually working with well, I should say potentially working with a Grammy award-winning producer that we just met, and I don't want to jinx it. We don't know if it's 100% going to happen, but if it does, you're going to see an EP coming out probably the end of the spring.
Yes.
And it's the new music. It's a lot different. It's a little heavier. It's a little dancier. It's just like an elevation of everything.
I love it.
But anyway, if you want to support any of this stuff, visionvideoband.com. We run the website. We do all, like, the only thing we don't do is we don't literally ship the merch, but we get it all packaged up and we get it all done. So it's all from us. We are totally independent. We have, the only thing I guess we've technically outsourced is booking agency, and that's just something that I don't want to do anyway. So
yeah.
And the only reason why I say that is, like, we spend a lot of time and work and energy and effort. So every little bit of money that's thrown at us, be it for tickets or merch, is just like so massively appreciated, because I do this full time now, and I live a very a blessed life. I'm not making crazy amounts of money, but I'm making art for a living, and that is something that has saved my life quite literally. And so every last red cent is just so massively appreciated. So
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that we got a chance to shout that out, and everybody heard it, and I'll link it and put this out when we put out the episode. And I'm excited you might be here in August, because it's not solidified yet, but I am recording a new album, and I haven't put out an album since 2007, and so I don't have any fancy production lined up, but I'm going to record an album. And I am planning on dropping it around August or around that time, because that's my 45th birthday. And I'm flirting with the idea of playing locally here in LA, like a night, kind of a record release party, AKA my birthday. And if you just so happen to be around a town, man, having you there would be a dream come true, just to hang out, have a drink, and you could watch me play some music too, like I'll watch you play music.
Oh, it's so satisfying. There are very few pleasures in this world, very few unknown pleasures to some people that are better than when you're on tour and you get a day off and you can go see a show and you don't have to do any of this stuff. You just get to enjoy it.
Yes.
So if we're in town when you're doing that, 100% I'll be there.
Yeah, and sure. I mean, of course, it might not line up, and I get that 100%. But I was like, well, maybe it would be awesome.
Maybe. Yeah.
And that's the first I've ever uttered about it. So my listeners now are gonna be like, oh, if they made it this far into the episode, then they got a little sneak peek of something. But visionvideoband.com is where they can find you. And then on TikTok, it's just Vision Video, right?
Vision Video Band.
Vision Video Band. Everything Vision Video Band. So make sure you follow Dusty and Vision Video and check out their music. They have a ton of music out there. It's all great. It's such a talented, smart guy. Really just enjoyed it. I mean, getting to know you even better. Now I'm just excited to hang out in person, because I know we could do this for days on end. We could talk about just life and the human experience.
Yeah, for sure. Have me back.
I will. Absolutely.
We could talk about stuff anytime. That's one of my favorite things about doing this full time, is my calendar is as long as I'm not on the road or in the studio, it's awesome, because I'm just I can do that.
I love it. It came together perfectly. And so this is the part of the show where I look back at the audience and I wrap things up. You are welcome to just sit through it, as it usually takes about a minute, and then, you can say goodbye now, whatever you'd like to do.
No problem. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. And come check us out. And I'm excited to see some of you out on the road.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dusty Gannon from Vision Video. And you heard him, visionvideoband.com, Vision Video Band everywhere. What a cool conversation and incredible time that we had together. And I'm glad you joined me for it. I hope you learned a little thing about Joy Division. And you check out that album if you've never heard it before. You will hear exactly what we were talking about that bass line and those tunes, those haunting tunes that really connect with the human condition. And that's the amazing thing about music, is how unifying it is for all of us. So once again, thank you for joining me for Waterproof Records. Make sure you check out DistroKid. Check out that link that I have. Support the sponsor, because the sponsor supports me and helps this show continue on and be possible. Spread the word about Waterproof Records. Tell your friends. Say, this is the coolest music podcast in existence. I mean, I know there's a lot of others out there, but why can't we be number one? You could make me number one. I just think I'm putting that ownership on you. But you could go out there and comment and like and tell everybody about it. And I hope you learned a lot today. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Waterproof Records.
Things are gonna change. I can feel it.
If this gonna be that kind of party, I'm gonna
Waterproof Records. Waterproof Records.